Right. Because I was thinking about friends of mine who, young mothers with 3 kids under 5, and that, to me, that is one of the most egoless things you can do.
Oh, it's a great compassion,
Well,
and
also,
patience.
well,
and
also too, to just actually let your
generosity.
body be taken over by another human being. Your hormones, the shape of you, your time, everything, your normal habits, your sense of cleanliness, everything. There's a couple of things I wanted to sort of. Is that wrong to say that, or a little bit too right? Too right. I'm really interested because I think there is a profound spirituality and sacredness in that egoless sort of state. But I know that it's not valued as many of the sort of so-called female principles aren't in society. And a couple of things, I suppose. One is, why is it that women, given that they actually, not all of us, I don't have a child, but that many women actually have a first-hand experience of that particular kind of egolessness, that's not, there's no reflection of that or space for that in any of the religious traditions?
Because who wrote the books?
Well, blokes. Right.
I mean, honestly and truthfully, who wrote all the sacred books? They were all written by men. And so they are written from the male perspective.
Do you think it would do you think there is going to begin a wisdom literature? It's starting already, obviously, but...
Yeah.
And do you think that will change, actually, world
Well,
religions?
I think both sides need to appreciate the other side. That's all. I mean, it's not that wisdom is exclusively female or exclusively male, but the main problem has only been that the voice heard has been the male voice, which is a very valid voice, but it's not the only voice.
Yeah.
And so what we need now is the feminine voice to come out and join the choir, And so that, as previously women, as you know, everybody knows, didn't have much voice, right? And so they were therefore not usually very educated, and their role was very submissive and family, but not given any particular appreciation for their role in the family. But now everybody is so educated, everybody is, has their ability to think, they have their ability to decide how they want to lead their lives, not just in the West, but more and more in Asia also. And, even in Buddhism, slowly, we are beginning to value the feminine.
Because it does strike me as, I suppose many of us actually kind of idealise Buddhism too.
Join the club, then you'll find out.
And I kind of think enlightenment seems like such an absolute concept. I can't understand how it would permit sexism, like if you're enlightened, how can you not have evolved beyond sexism, I suppose? I
guess the problem is, because this is something people say, well, but these lamas, etc., they're so wise, they're so compassionate, which is undoubted. Many of them really are. How can they still, disregard the feminine? But we're living in ultimate and relative truth. And so on the ultimate level, they would see no difference. But on the relative level, then they're still habituated to their social context, in which, especially for the lamas, many of them were brought up in monasteries since the age of 2. They're separated from their mothers, brought up only by monks. So that the feminine is an abstract concept. They actually didn't have much contact with women. And so that, even though on an ultimate level they might see, we're all, there's no difference. Buddha nature is not male or female. on a relative level, still they are part of the social context, which, gave women, on the whole, a submissive role. Of course, having said that, I have to say that both in Burma and in Tibet and other purely Buddhist countries, women often are very strong compared with like Chinese Confucian type style of women and India. Tibetan women are very tough.
Right.
And they often run the businesses. They are the ones in charge of the money. They are very strong ladies. And of course, in Tibet, they also had polyandry. Which was very common, meaning one wife had several husbands. For example, if there were 4 brothers, 3 brothers, then she would marry the older brother and take on all the younger ones. In order to keep the property in not being dispersed amongst all the brothers, they only had one. They kept it going, And so that gave her a big, strong role. I knew a woman who had 5 husbands.
Wow.
And she was, they had to toe the line, know.
And they have... Oh, it sounds like Themyscira and Wonder Woman, really, to me. I'm loving that. So despite that, though, there have been dakinis, which is that the right term?
Yeah, dakini.
But how much of that wisdom and knowledge has been passed on, and why are the sacred, given that there have been the dakinis, why are they not more present? Is it just because we live in a patriarchal culture, or?
Yeah, it's a patriarchal culture. As most of the world was.
And is. Because I'm going to go to the place where, it sort of is begging to be asked this question, I think, about with the Dalai Lama, who said that he was very happy for the next Dalai Lama to be a woman.
Oh, he would be happy, but his 10,000 monks wouldn't be.
Oh, okay. Well, That's why we love him so much. But he did then say at the end of it that she would need to be attractive, or it would be of no use. Now, I'm wondering if that's a sort of a shrewd sort of a statement, that he's assessed that, conventionally attractive women are more listened to. This is giving the benefit of the doubt. But people struggle with those sorts of statements.
Yeah, I know. It was very naughty of him. But on the other hand, to put it the other way, another very important Lama in the Tibetan tradition is the Karmapa. And he is considered to be very attractive. And he said the reason why he's attractive is because the first Karmapa was so ugly he was considered to be like a monkey. And he's shown like that, actually, in the Tankas. And so, because he had to struggle to get people to take him seriously, because he was so plain, he vowed that all the future Karmapas would come back very attractive in order to draw people to them, to the Dharma.
Right.
So, that's the other side of it. You know? People are often drawn towards people who are more attractive.
It's the truth, yeah. They've done all the studies that they get more listened to, and I'm saying they.
So
we. I'm going to go back to my questions now because I've thrown myself. So I think one of the things that, and I know that you don't want to go on because you're up to pussy's bow with talking about being in the cave, but if I can put it that way. But I think people are so compelled by that story because it is one of our greatest fears. In prison, solitary confinement is the worst thing that can happen to you. And you said something very funny.
I said that I always thought if I got arrested, I'd have to punch one of the guards so they would put me in solitary confinement.
Sort of evolutionary psychologists tell us that we're social animals, and that being excluded from the herd is the sort of the most cruel thing that you can do to people. And yet you've gone completely against that. And women particularly are perceived to be extremely relational. And yet you've managed to spend an entire 12 years on your own. And I suppose people find that sort of... Is it a question of discipline, or what is it that gives you the strength to be able to do that?
Well, first of all, it wasn't 12 years solid in isolation. This is not true at all. Except for the last 3 years. Mostly every year in the summer, I would go off or people would come. I mean, I was dealing also with the people in the monastery and so forth. So it wasn't that I was just spending 12 years in total isolation. It was only the last 3 years I did that. But you know, I didn't feel that I was in isolation, because as far as I was concerned, my cave was filled with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So it was quite crowded.
Right. But did you feel attachment to them, or is that...
No, I mean, they came and went, you know. When I summoned them, they appeared.
Because I think that's the thing I feel often when I meditate. Like, I kind of freak out at the idea of silence and stillness and blankness.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I totally freak. Oh, I'm so easily what's that shiny, bright thing? Distractible. Very distractible.
No. I mean, I don't know. I think that, to my mind, certainly when I was there in October, November, usually when the first snow fell, then I would think, oh, you know, for the next 6 months, nobody can come. And to my mind, it was an incredible opening feeling of spaciousness. You know, that for the next, you know, how many months, because it snowed very heavily in those days in Rahu, I could just completely merge myself with the practice and would not be disturbed.
The only thing I can...
it was great.
The only thing I can relate that to is writing a book, where, because I feel like in the push and pull of ordinary, the commerce of ordinary conversation, it's hard to sink down to deeper truths, shyer truths, and they kind of get bullied out of it because you're conceding to other people. And I found in that solitude of writing that I could follow the stream of consciousness to sort of newer parts of truth that I didn't know existed. Is it something that's comparable to that feeling?
You know, what in meditation is trying to achieve, if you could call it that, is to drop our ordinary conceptual thinking mind and open to a much deeper level of our consciousness, which is not based on the duality of thinker and thought, right? And for that, it is very helpful if external circumstances are in themselves, it's not essential, but it's helpful, supportive, to have that sense of open, spacious peacefulness, quiet, silence, outer silence, to begin to recognize our inner silence.
Which I think brings me back to the question I was asking earlier of like a mother of 3 or a father of 3. How can someone who, or a practicing nun or monk who is caught up in the day-to-dayness of things, is there any chance of getting close to that sort of stillness and silence in that busy life? Can it still be done?
Well, it can, but it probably would happen more if you already had some background in it, you know, like anything, you know. But I think if while you're in the stage of taking care of 3 rambunctious little kids, rather than trying to be frustrated because you're not accessing your inner silence, it would be better just to recognize this is the opportunity to cultivate other qualities also needed on the spiritual path, such as compassion, loving kindness, patience, generosity, and how to love without too much attachment.
Right. Because your mother was a remarkable example
She was
of that.
great.
Yeah. She was happy to let you go at a tender age and encourage you.
She recognized that, you know, my path was my path, and that she, you know, she should rejoice in it, even though it didn't include her.
Mm.